"2019 marked the 50th anniversary of Scooby-Doo as a franchise, and, like any major anniversary of a pop culture institution, there were several special products released over that year to commemorate the occasion, including special edition toys and other merchandise, brand new DVD re-releases of previously released movies and TV shows, even releases of shows that hadn't been fully collected on home video yet at the time, like the first season of Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo. On the direct-to-video front, it was apparently decided that the two movies being released in 2019 would directly call back to other eras in Scooby history. One which would tie up a plotline that had been left dangling for 34 years, and the other a supposedly respectful homage to what had started the entire line of direct-to-video Scooby movies. Both would wind up causing controversy among Scooby fans, kind of giving the anniversary celebrations a black eye. Today we look at the first of these movies, Scooby-Doo and the Curse of the 13th Ghost. It was released on DVD and digital on February 5th, 2019, written by Tim Sheridan and directed by Cecilia Aronovich Hamilton. As the title implies, one of the goals of this movie was to act as a long overdue finale to the 1985 series The 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo. There's a video elsewhere on this channel as part of the Saturday series that goes into detail, but the basic premise was Scooby and Shaggy were tricked into opening the mystical Chest of Demons, an artifact that had imprisoned the 13 most terrifying ghosts and demons on the face of the earth. Because they were the ones that let the ghosts out, they were the only ones who could put them back. Shaggy and Scooby were joined in their quest by Daphne and Scrappy-Doo, with added assistance from preteen con artist Flim Flam and warlock Vincent Van Ghoul, who had been played in the original series by the legendary Vincent Price. The series only ran for 13 episodes, and since the first episode was exclusively exposition revolving around the boys being tricked into opening the chest in the first place, that meant when the show finished its first season, only 12 of the ghosts had actually been caught. 13 Ghosts was cancelled after its only season, only rerunning the first episode once, then being replaced altogether with reruns of Laugh Olympics in 1986. However, by the time production started on this movie, there had been a change in attitude from both Warner Brothers and producer Jim Krieg, both of whom were of the opinion that Scooby-Doo shouldn't have real supernatural elements, but were also insisting on both this movie and the next one be follow-ups to previous productions where the supernatural was real. Tim Sheridan was interested in making this movie an actual finale to the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, but things got compromised in all senses of the word when the notes came down from above. So how did things turn out? Well, let's dive into Scooby-Doo and the Curse of the 13th Ghost and find out. The film opens in the past, where we find Vincent Van Ghoul and his colleague Mortifer capturing the last of the 13 ghosts in the Chest of Demons, presumably some years before Scooby and Shaggy were tricked into letting them out again. However, it appears the final ghost had some minions of his own, intent on freeing the ghosts once again. The two decide to split up, Mortifer offering to take the chest. Vincent declines, saying it's too dangerous, so Mortifer, using some magic of his own, it's unclear at this point whether this is real magic or stage magic, to act as a distraction while Vincent escapes with the chest. This does not go well for him. We then go into one of the best opening credits sequences in any of these films, as Vincent, voiced by Maurice LaMarche, since Vincent Price is regrettably no longer with us, recites a poem which acts as a recap of the original series for the benefit of anyone who hasn't seen it. Tim Sheridan wrote the first couple of stanzas for an idea for what to do, and the powers that be liked it so much they asked him to write out the whole thing. And it's really effective.
their final mystery pursue and capture one last bugaboo, the 13th ghost of Scooby-Doo.
We return to the present, where the gang are pursuing their latest miscreant, and Fred wastes no time in upping the counter.
What are you doing, Fred? He's getting away.
Daphne, you should never run on a moving escalator. Safety first.
They manage to catch him, of course, except this time things don't turn out the way they expect.
I don't understand. If it's not a mask, then that means he's...
The real Farmer Morgan.
Why was he running?
I'm afraid of teenagers.
Yeah, this time the gang screwed up, and screwed up badly enough that the sheriff actually calls them out on their mystery-solving antics.
You're almost 18. After that, if somebody like Morgan here presses harassment charges, you're looking at prison time.
Keep this one in your back pocket, folks. We'll come back to it in another video. The sheriff gives the kids an ultimatum, saying that if he sees them driving the mystery machine again, he'll arrest them. So, reluctantly, the gang decides it's time to close up shop, selling everything they've accumulated over their career at a garage sale at Daphne's house. And speaking of which, hey look, the members of the gang aren't homeless and living out of the van. And speaking of the van, Fred does the unthinkable and sells the mystery machine.
This just doesn't feel right.
I love my mystery machine. I feel like I just sold part of myself.
Velma tries to console Daphne by pointing out all their outstanding cases are closed. Again, keep this in your back pocket. We're coming back to it later. And they have no unfinished business. And then a customer in a loud shirt asks how much for the crystal ball he finds, which causes Shaggy, Scooby, and Daphne to gasp. The boys try to get the guy to drop the ball, but it winds up in Shaggy's hands and activates.
Shaggy, is that you?
It is, of course, Vincent finally getting in touch with the three of them after months. Yeah, here's where the retcons start, folks. We'll get into this detail in a minute. Vincent tells the gang that he's finally found the 13th ghost, or more accurately, the ghost has found him. He tells Daphne, Shaggy, and Scooby to come to him so they can finally seal the chest of demons for good, but the signal cuts out before he can give them any more details. So, here's where things start getting warped to fit the then current mandate that the gang are always teenagers and that actual supernatural events are, at best, ambiguous. In the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, it was pretty much understood, if unspoken, that Shaggy and Daphne were adults, somewhere in their 20s, and it had been pretty much like that for most of the 80s. By this point, in what little passed for Scooby-Doo canon, both Fred and Velma had left the gang to pursue other interests. Fred to write books, and Velma started working for NASA. This had been established in the previous series, The New Scooby and Scrappy Show, also known as The New Scooby-Doo Mysteries. Neither Fred nor Velma appeared in 13 Ghosts. But now, Tim Sheridan has to justify their absence in this new always teen setup the movies are going for. So what does he do?
Something happened. That summer you were both away at camp.
Yeah, Fred and Velma were away at camp while everything was happening during the events of 13 Ghosts. And if you think that's one of the dumbest retcons ever, oh, just you wait, because there's more coming. And not just in this movie, either. Daphne explains what's going on to Fred and Velma as she gets changed to deal with the situation. She reveals that Scooby nearly had a nervous breakdown while they were ghost hunting and had to break off the quest before the final ghost was caught. Now, this isn't quite what happened in the series, but yes, the episode Ship of Ghouls did feature Scooby at the end of his rope with the whole thing, so it's not entirely inaccurate. The scene also has a couple of nice Easter eggs about how Daphne's design was changed from her classic look to something a little more current. Well, current for 1985, anyway. And on top of that, she still has the red version of the Mystery Machine used during that series as well.
It's not a van. It's a strategic all-terrain mobile command unit.
Fred takes the wheel and immediately finds that he can't drive the van because it's a manual transmission and he can't drive stick. This is Fred's arc in the movie, gang. He's being shoved out of the leader position by Daphne due to the situation and isn't coping well with that fact. As the gang make their way to Vincent's, Velma's skepticism starts rearing its, by now, ugly head.
It's full of nonsense, like the chest of demons can only be opened by the living.
That's true?
Of course it's true, because the dead don't open things. They don't do anything. They're dead.
But we also get some useful information out of her. The remaining ghost is Asmodus, the king of demons and the most powerful of the 13 ghosts. However, any further research is interrupted by a suspicious car that starts chasing the gang. And tailing them isn't the only suspicious thing about it.
Insurance follows the driver, right?
Yes.
Well, then we've got a problem.
Scooby and Shaggy deploy the various gadgets the van has to try to get rid of the ghost car, but it doesn't work, and ultimately Daphne counters by driving off the cliff, where the gang is saved by another Easter egg.
That was awesome!
Arriving at Vincent's castle, the boys refuse to go in, which results in Fred having to do the usual negotiation since Daphne's taking the lead on this one. Fred, however, is not having it.
Look, I'm gonna say 1 Scooby snack, you're gonna say 3, and then we settle on 2, okay? Let's just cut to the chase.
The gang split up to look for Vincent, with Velma, Shaggy, and Scooby going toward the kitchen, of course, and Fred and Daphne following the suddenly glowing crystal ball. In the kitchen, Velma proceeds to be annoying by more or less debunking all the spooky stuff happening at the mansion, like the constantly flapping shutters and finding all the wind is coming from the speakers. After some of the usual stumbling blindly through the creepy old castle shenanigans, the gang all wind up in the catacombs underneath the castle and find Vincent tied up in one of the coffins. But no sooner is he free, Asmodus shows up. Vincent tells the gang to open the chest of demons, and Asmodus demands they give it to him, but there's a problem with both of those plans.
I mailed it back to you when school started.
Where did you send it?
Your real house in the Himalayas.
Since the chest isn't there, Asmodus buzzes off in search of it, triggering a race to get it before he does. We then go to a flashback where a young Vincent and Mortifer originally found the chest of demons and accidentally broke the lock, freeing the 13 ghosts. They managed to put them back, where they stayed until Shaggy and Scooby let them out. And Velma gets obnoxious again.
Who did they turn out to be? Crooked real estate agents? Disinherited stepchildren? Vengeful lighthouse keepers?
Now, I talked about how Velma made the shift to the Team Skeptic back during the What's New era, specifically around the time of Scooby-Doo and the Goblin King, but by the time this movie came out, it had become really obnoxious, and as much as I personally love the show, I kinda have to blame Be Cool Scooby-Doo for this aspect of Velma's characterization. Because Be Cool was trying for a more explicit comedy vibe, some have made unflattering comparisons to Family Guy because of the art style, but I find the humor is more in line with something like Phineas and Ferb. Aspects of the gang's personalities were exaggerated, especially in the case of Fred, Velma, and Daphne. As the comic relief, Shaggy and Scooby really didn't need much alteration. Fred was more obsessed with mystery solving than usual, Daphne had a variety of interests, most of which involved annoying Fred, and Velma's skepticism bordered on the ludicrous. Unfortunately, this exaggeration of Velma's skepticism has stuck around in pretty much every Scooby project since, and sometimes it gets really annoying and makes Velma come off as a real jerk, especially here since she's pretty much outright dismissing important events in the lives of her friends just because it doesn't fit her worldview and she didn't witness them herself. Which is an important thing to keep in mind going forward with this movie. No matter what she says, remember this fact. Velma wasn't there. She was not there when Daphne, Shaggy, and Scooby dealt with the other 12 ghosts, and as such, well, maybe some of the things she'll say later shouldn't be taken at face value. Anyway, Shaggy points out the portrait above Vincent's fireplace doesn't look anything like him, but Vincent dodges the implicit question and says they need to get to the Himalayas before Asmodus. And fortunately, he has a plane handy and a qualified pilot.
It's Captain Rogers up here, young man. Not for vanity, but because when you've got 10 tons of steel and the lives of every passenger in your hands, it's best to think of yourself as the office, not the man.
Arriving in the Himalayas and flying over the temple where Daphne, Shaggy, and Scooby found the chest of demons, Daphne notices a courtyard she doesn't remember seeing before. The gang lands and Vincent reports that Shaggy's package was never delivered by the post office. On top of that, the whole village is deserted, which, according to the news, is because there's a sudden uptick in demon infestation, which means Asmodus is likely already here. And he's not the only one the gang's met recently that's arrived. The guy in the Hawaiian shirt from the garage sale, Bernie Allen, as Fred says, is here as well. But as soon as he sees Shaggy and Scooby, he bolts for the temple. Split-up time happens again as Daphne, Shaggy, Scooby, and Vincent follow Bernie, while Fred and Velma head for the post office to see if the chest wound up in the dead letter office.
Mail goes in, but it never comes out.
Oh, shut up, Vincent. Fred and Velma find the post office deserted like the rest of the village, but as they search for the chest, someone is watching from the shadows. Meanwhile, the rest of the gang are following Bernie, and when Shaggy suggests Vincent cast a truth-telling spell on Bernie to find out what he's doing here, Vincent hems and haws. This is because, as we'll learn later, he's spell-blocked and hasn't been able to cast any magic for a while. The actual reason is because Warner Brothers executives didn't want real magic in this story in any capacity, and it's going to undercut a lot of what comes later. Yay! Before they can do anything to Bernie, he vanishes and the ghost car from earlier shows up, but instead of trying to run them down, it seems to have other ideas. As Daphne, Shaggy, Scooby, and Vincent hurtle down the mountain barely ahead of the looming wall of icy death following them, we go back to Fred and Velma at the post office. When Velma starts to get frustrated, this happens.
V-E-L-M-A. She's the one who...
Why are you doing that?
A box falls from one of the shelves and Fred goes to pick it up.
I think I would know if I was walking...
The trap was set by a guy in a yellow hoodie, and I'm not going to play the pointless suspense game the movie does. This is Flim Flam, now older and taller. They write it off as him having had a growth spurt in the intervening time between the series and this movie, and yeah, it's not worth getting bent out of shape for, so let's move on. Flim Flam shows them the package registry, where Velma finds that Shaggy's package had been held at the post office under his real name of Norval Rogers, but it had been picked up that morning. When Velma mentions the chest of demons, it gets Flim Flam's attention, and he tells the two to follow him. Back on the mountain, the rest of the gang manage to outrun the snow and wind up near the temple. Except the ghost car starts another avalanche and they all toboggan along with it using a handy sign, eventually arriving at the temple. And as for Fred and Velma...
Prepare to enter the realm of darkness.
As anyone who's seen the original series knows, there is nothing Flim Flam will not exploit to make a buck, and that includes, apparently, the chest of demons. Velma, naturally to prove her point, opens it and almost immediately regrets it.
See? Just an empty old...
Except this chest turns out to be a cooler, and Flim Flam has tons of other merchandise as well, which, when Velma presses him, turns out he's never sold. Except for once. More on that later. When Fred mentions that they're looking for the real chest of demons and that they're ghost hunters, Flim Flam shows them his back room of ghost hunting gear. Unfortunately, he doesn't convince either of them to buy. As they leave, he warns them it's dangerous after dark, and with good reason, too.
Let me tell you, if something was trying to nab us, I'm pretty sure we'd...
Back at the temple, the other four are trapped because the snow has blocked the entrance. As they go in search of another way out, they find the courtyard Daphne noticed earlier, where they find a candle burning and something worse. Asmodus has the package and opens a secret door in the wall, escaping the courtyard. Thinking fast, Daphne manages to wedge it open so the rest of them can follow. They find the shipping label from the package, confirming that Asmodus has the chest of demons. They follow Asmodus, and this pretty much triggers the chase. Sort of. It's actually a sequence where the gang play keep away against Asmodus, with the chest passing back and forth between them and the demon. Ultimately, Asmodus gets the chest and heads into another room, only to run into another classic Scooby bit I don't think we've seen in a while. Shaggy and Scooby put on costumes and annoy the shit out of the monster.
Don't mind Brother Scoobert. He's observing the last year of a 10-year vow of silence.
Are you?
Well, he was.
Honestly, I forgot how much I missed this gag until I saw this sequence. It's one of the best parts of the whole movie, to be honest with you. Angered with being tricked, Asmodus turns into another Easter egg and starts chasing the boys. They meet up with Daphne and Vincent, and they wind up back at the entrance. Unfortunately, Scooby can't dig through the snow because it's iced over, and Vincent finally tells them that he hasn't been able to use magic since Asmodus showed up. He tries anyway, but when the spell fails, Asmodus taunts him.
No powers!
Power?
When the light fades, Shaggy, Scooby, and Daphne are outside the temple. Vincent contacts them on Daphne's crystal ball.
I always carry a spare.
And tells them to take the plane and leave him to deal with Asmodus. He says he has the chest and will take care of things before ending the call. Daphne's not happy with this plan, but before she can do anything, Fred and Velma drop down from wherever they've been this whole time, and Velma's apparently had a come-to-Jesus moment because of it.
I see everything clearly now. Yes, everything.
However, it's not all sunshine and roses. The doors and the windows to the temple are frozen shut, so Daphne's questioning her skills as a leader. Velma's had her whole worldview upended and is pretty sure the Earth is doomed once the chest is opened again. And Shaggy and Scooby are pretty much right there with both of them. And then we discover what Fred was doing at camp.
Last summer I went to cheerleading camp. I've been down in the dumps because I thought everyone had a job but me. But now I know what my job is, what it's always been. I'm the one who believes with all his heart in the rest of you.
After Fred gives Daphne a literal new perspective on their situation, the gang regroup, with Fred and Velma taking the van back to the village.
Get it to my stump.
Oh, that's not the clutch.
You mean this is not the...
It's the emergency brake.
And the two of them head back to Flim Flam's store and clean out his inventory, getting his attention when they tell him all 13 ghosts are about to be unleashed. Meanwhile, Daphne, Shaggy, and Scooby parachute back into the temple courtyard. Fred, Velma, and Flim Flam head for the temple but run into the ghost car again. Another chase breaks out, and Flim Flam, who, just as a reminder, has not yet had his identity confirmed by the movie, surprises Fred and Velma by knowing how to use the van's various gadgets to their advantage, tricking the car over a cliff and into a boulder. Inside the temple, Daphne, Shaggy, and Scooby find Vincent facing off against Asmodus. Fred, Velma, and Flim Flam manage to melt a passageway through the snow using Flim Flam's signature product, Lots of Luck Joy Juice, and hear Asmodus roaring at Vincent. Vincent taunts Asmodus further, enraging the demon, and then this happens.
I am the 14th ghost.
Not a great plan.
Asmodus attacks the phony ghost, which causes Vincent to toss the chest aside to tackle him. This, however, gives Asmodus the chance to grab the chest for himself and dash off with Vincent following him. This is where both groups meet up, and we get confirmation that yes, this is Flim Flam and everyone's back together.
Except Scrappy.
What's a scrappy?
Okay. There are many things I've been willing to let slide due to the fact that, as we've established, Scooby-Doo as a franchise largely has very little actual continuity, and what there is can be, and usually is, ignored without any consequences. However, if you are going to make a joke about Scrappy not being there, then maybe remember that Scrappy was introduced before Fred and Velma were dropped from the regular cast in the 80s. They know who Scrappy is. Normally, this wouldn't bother me, but it's such a lazy joke when they could have come up with something totally ridiculous to explain Scrappy's absence. Hell, make a reference to the first live-action movie and imply Scrappy's doing 15 to life in a maximum security dog pound. And I just came up with that off the top of my head. In short, while I think some Scooby fans are too hard on this movie for what it's going to do near the end, I do think they have a point to be annoyed by Velma saying this here. Anyway, the gang finds Vincent, who reveals that the portrait Shaggy noticed earlier wasn't of him, but of his ancestor Aamod Van Ghoul, who is the most powerful sorcerer on Earth. However, as has been noted, power corrupts, and Aamod started going full supervillain until the forces of good trapped him in an inescapable prison, the Chest of Demons, and while trapped there, he grew his power and eventually became Asmodus, the King of Demons. And unfortunately, it is at this point that Asmodus appears and opens the chest, much to everyone's horror, except Fred.
We've got spirits! Yes, we do! We've got spirits! How about...
Velma heads forward to take on Asmodus with Flim Flam's vacuum spook, but throws it aside because she's realized something important.
I'm saying that rules are rules, and the first rule of the Chest of Demons is that it can only be opened by the living.
Why, that's right.
This means, of course, that since Asmodus opened the chest, he can't actually be a ghost or demon, at least as far as this movie's concerned. Given the rant I just went on a minute ago, in the interest of fairness, I should point out that the original series was inconsistent on this rule, as a couple of ghosts were able to open the chest at various times. So yeah, you could make the argument that it's not a hard and fast rule, but this video is probably too long as it is, and we need to wrap this up. Regardless of whether the chest can only be opened by the living or not, Asmodus turns out to be another creep in a mask, which means it's time for the reveal.
It can't be. I saw you die.
So what was this all about? Money. Mortifer always wanted to sell the chest, but knew Vincent would never agree to it. So how much money are we talking about?
And how'd you come up with 10 million? That's your asking number, isn't it, Gwinch?
Yeah, Bernie Allen shows up, and he's got a secret of his own.
Lance Linklater, undercover Interpol detective and amateur figure skater.
I have no clue what the hell the ice skating thing has to do with anything other than as a bad gag taking the place of a recognizable character trait. Although admittedly, 13 Ghosts did this kind of weirdness all the time, so your mileage may vary. Anyway, Interpol had apparently been following Mortifer ever since he started making overture to the world's wealthiest people about purchasing the Chest of Demons. And as for why Linklater kept running away from the gang when he saw them...
I'm afraid of teenagers.
Yeah, this thing is tripping hard at the finish line, folks. Bear with me as we get through the rest of this. As it turns out, everyone hasn't actually been doing all this over the Chest of Demons, but one of the Cooler's Flim Flam sells. Specifically, the only one he was ever able to sell. To Shaggy. Mortifer manages to make a break for it, escaping in the ghost car, but because of the avalanches it caused before, everyone goes after him in order to prevent another one. But sure enough, another one gets triggered coming down the mountain and causing the bridge to collapse under the car. And then something weird happens.
Asmod.
Vincent isn't sure of what's apparently caused Aamod to pass on to whatever is next, but Velma points out in the book of lore they've been using all movie the word for revenge in Sanskrit looks like the word for redemption, implying that during his time trapped in the chest, Aamod may have come to regret what he did, and when Shaggy and Scooby released the 13 Ghosts, rather than terrorizing the world, he was looking out for Vincent. And now he's at peace. Yeah, she doesn't believe it either, folks. Before we get into that, Mortifer survived the drop and is immediately arrested by Interpol. And as the gang gets ready to head home...
My healthy skepticism is back.
There is nothing healthy about your skepticism, Velma. So she reveals she just said all that to Vincent to make him feel better, and as for the other 12 ghosts...
Mass hallucinations from high-altitude oxygen deprivation. I mean, it is the Himalayas.
Again, I think hardcore Scooby fans who hate this movie are giving Velma way too much authority here. The quest for the 13 Ghosts took place all over the world and was not confined to the Himalayas. So her theory is complete crap, and taking her word for it as any kind of final say on the matter is ridiculous. Because as I said before, Velma wasn't there. And even her explanation of her and Fred's trip up the mountain is stupid.
Ski lift.
Give me a break!
And to prove she's right, she pulls out the real Chest of Demons, which had been in the van the whole time, inside Shaggy's luggage, and prepares to open it.
Ugh, fine. What?
Nothing.
The gang takes off, with Flim Flam staying behind to fleece the tourists with a new legend of the Chest of Demons, and Daphne cedes the leadership role back to Fred, with her final act declaring the gang's unretirement. As I've said earlier, I think hardcore Scooby fans were harder on this movie than they really should have been. I get that it's not really a satisfying ending to the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo storyline, and that the attempts at ambiguity don't really work. The executive meddling didn't do this story any favors, and they should have just let the damn thing serve as the finale to the story it was meant to be. And yes, Velma is extra annoying in this one, but in that case there's a reason for it, because this movie is actually the start of a trilogy, but we'll get more into that as we go along. That said, I still think Scooby-Doo and the Curse of the 13th Ghost is actually pretty good. There's a lot of fun action, some great gags, the voice work is excellent as always, and aside from a couple of stumbles due to the insistence on the always teenagers, always a creep in a mask mandates, overall, it's still a great watch. Give this one another shot if you didn't like it before, and definitely watch it if you haven't seen it at all. I think you'll enjoy yourself a lot more than you think you will. And with that, it's time to close the lid on another of the 30-plus films of Scooby-Doo.
Scooby-Dooby-Doo!
Those meddling kids to join the chase. No creep can keep them